Two British tourists are attacked by a stranger in the Australian outback. The incident triggers one of the biggest investigations in Australian criminal history. But there's no trace of the attacker, no murder weapon, and no body.
Is very much a needle in a haystack situation. I don't think things could look any blacker.
Within days, one of the victims has the finger of suspicion pointed straight at her.
What was this woman hiding was the question that people were asking.
Sydney, Australia, January 2001. Home to the iconic architecture and a vibrant social scene, the city has recently hosted the Olympic Games. Two British backpackers, 28-year-old Peter Falconio and 27-year-old Joanne Lees, have been together for 5 years. They're enjoying the last leg of a round-the-world trip and make Sydney their temporary home. After 6 months in the bustling city, the couple heads off for a change of scenery. Their next stop, Australia's beautiful but barren interior, the Outback.
Travelling in the Outback does have its inherent dangers because it is so isolated. If your vehicle breaks down and you are stuck in searing heat, it can be a very serious situation indeed.
On the afternoon of July 14th, 2001, the couple leaves Alice Springs, a frontier town in the heart of the Outback.
They left Alice Springs, travelled north, stopped at a place called Tea Tree to admire the sunset, and by Joanne's own account, they stopped, had a few drags on a joint, and then continued on.
At around 7:30 p.m., the couple notices bright headlights closing in behind them. Peter slows to let the vehicle pass, but it stays on his tail. Later, Joanne recalls what happened next.
Peter and I assumed from his gestures that there was a mechanical fault, possibly with our exhaust, and we'd experienced that throughout our travels, so we thought, yeah, okay. And we didn't want to break down in the middle of nowhere.
Joanne gave a detailed account of the incident to police.
The driver signalled to Peter, the driver of the car at the time, to pull over, which they did. There was some discussion about whether the safety of that.
Joanne says Peter then steps out of the vehicle and tells her to wait inside.
Pete was saying, oh, cheers, mate, thanks for stopping. Oh, you've seen sparks come out of our exhaust. Pete also asked me to rev the engine, which I did. Then I heard a loud bang, which I thought was the vehicle backfiring.
Joanne turns for the door and suddenly finds the stranger standing right beside the driver's window with a gun.
I just couldn't believe that this was happening and feared for my life. I was terrified.
Joanne remembers the man telling her to lean forward and securing her hands behind her back with cable ties. Peter is nowhere to be seen.
She's pushed out of the car. There is a struggle as he was trying to tape her legs together. She was hit in the side of the head and more or less dragged and forced back to his full drive, where she was pushed in.
A strange calmness came over me, almost like an acceptance that this is it, I'm going to die. But then, out of sheer terror, I realised that I wasn't just going to die, he was going to rape me. And I believe that was the turning point, and that's what saved me, because I just, all of a sudden, from somewhere, found some strength.
Joanne says she manages to escape from the stranger's car and scrambles into the brush. Her attacker pursues her in the pitch dark. He comes dangerously close. But isn't able to find her. Eventually, he gives up. After 5 hours hiding under a bush, Joanne finally emerges and flags down a passing truck. She never sees Peter Falconio again. Joanne's account to police sparks one of the biggest manhunts in Australian history. Roadblocks are set up and aerial and motorcycle teams scour the bush. They have to cover an area that's twice the size of Texas, but they find no sign of Peter or his attacker.
In terms of Mr. Falconio, is very much a needle in a haystack situation that we're dealing with. I don't think things could look any blacker.
Investigators in the Australian Outback scour the rough terrain for any sign of Peter Falconio. His girlfriend, Joanne, narrowly escapes a violent attack by a stranger on the side of the road, while Peter is still missing. But finally, the couple's abandoned van is located near a pool of Peter's blood, 185 miles from Alice Springs. The story attracts global attention. International press descend upon the small town of Barrow Creek.
It's now 4 days since the abduction along this stretch of road, just over there where the orange cones have been placed.
The journalists are hungry for information, but the only witness to the crime is reluctant to speak to the press. Rumors start to circulate about why Joanne won't talk. She quickly turns from victim to accused.
To some, her story seemed almost too incredible to be true.
To have someone claim that they were stopped in the middle of the desert and that their boyfriend had gone missing, not sure how or why, and that someone was pushing around in the desert, it was quite unbelievable. It just seemed to be like such a rare occurrence for something like that to happen.
Then, 11 days after the attack, Joanne Lees finally breaks her silence. Accompanied by one of Peter's brothers, she agrees to speak to the media. She's defensive about the media speculation of her story.
I've got a problem with all press that distort the truth and doubt my story. Anyone that's spoken to me or has been in contact with me, no one doubts me. It's only media that have questioned my story.
But her appearance does not calm suspicions. It's suggested that she doesn't look like a woman who's just been through a terrifying ordeal. Then, 3.5 weeks after the attack, a bombshell. The forensic report reveals that DNA of an unknown man has been detected in a spot of blood on the T-shirt Joanne was wearing.
We have found and have established a DNA profile of a male person on the clothing of Joanne Lees. This is significant and clearly is not Joanne's, it's clearly not Peter's.
It's another year before the investigation takes another step forward. In August 2002, a drug-running drifter is picked up by police in South Australia in connection with an alleged abduction and rape.
What became of interest to us was the equipment that he had with him, the ties. The fact is that the victims were tied up with the cable ties and such, that he was armed at the time, and a few other things. He was driving the four-wheel drive.
When the suspect's DNA is analyzed, it's a match to the blood on Joanne's T-shirt.
The focus of the task force will remain surrounding this person currently held in custody, and we'll be seeking to swear out a warrant for the arrest of this person for the murder of Peter Falconio.
Despite not having a body or murder weapon, police considered the DNA match compelling evidence. And Bradley John Murdoch is charged with the murder of Peter Falconio, November 14, 2003. The following year, a preliminary hearing is held in Darwin, the capital of Australia's Northern Territory. It will determine if there's a sufficient case to go to trial. Murdoch has already been found not guilty of the unrelated rape and abduction in South Australia. Joanne Lees returns to the country for preliminary hearings and must endure the public airing of the most intimate details of her personal life.
With police searching for her missing boyfriend, Peter Falconio, she was carrying on email correspondence with another man called Nick.
A media frenzy surrounds Joanne Lees as she returns to Australia for the preliminary hearing in the Peter Falconio case. It is here where a judge will decide if there's enough evidence against Bradley John Murdoch for the case to go to trial. To the fascination of the press, it's revealed at the hearing that while Joanne lived with Peter Falconio in Sydney, she had a relationship with another man, Nick Riley.
The latest revelations revolve around her behaviour at the time these pictures were taken shortly after the attack. With police searching for her missing boyfriend, Peter Falconio, she was carrying on email correspondence with another man called Nick.
The business with Nick Riley was almost the smoking gun, I guess, as far as the UK media were concerned. Yes, she did have an affair with this person, and she did have some other guy on the side. And she had sent emails after Peter Falconio had disappeared to Nick about catching up in Berlin when she got back, which kind of seemed somewhat inappropriate.
The personal revelations only fan the flames of suspicion which still hang over Joanne. But police dismiss her affair with Nick as irrelevant, and it's decided the case will go to trial. On October 17, 2005, Peter's family arrives from the UK. The eyes of the world are focused on Joanne and how she will conduct herself at the trial of her boyfriend's alleged killer. When she appears, she's a transformed woman.
We saw a very big change in Joanne. She was very conscious of what she was wearing. In fact, she probably dressed down quite corporate-wise, went to plain skirts, plain blouses, that sort of thing.
As proceedings begin, the prosecution must establish a murder has actually taken place. They have three key pieces of evidence.
The first was that Joanne Lees heard a sound like a gunshot. There was blood on the ground, confirmed to be a DNA match with Peter Falconio. And Peter Falconio, a man who maintained contact with his family throughout his travels, had not made any contact.
But the evidence is circumstantial, even Murdoch's DNA on Joanne's T-shirt. The prosecution needs to prove Murdoch is behind the murder. They present further evidence. closed-circuit video from a gas station in Alice Springs at around midnight on the night of the attack. They claim it places Murdoch in the right place at the right time.
Mr. Murdoch said it was not him. The prosecution case was that it was.
Still, the surveillance footage and DNA on Joanne's T-shirt aren't enough to prove that Murdoch was the attacker. So the prosecution presents more critical DNA evidence, the cable restraints used to tie Joanne's hands together.
The finding of a match to his DNA profile deep down within the construction of the cable tie restraints connected him not simply with Joanne Lees, but with the commission of the crime, because the cable tie restraints were a central element of the crime itself.
But the DNA evidence found in the cable ties is controversial.
From what I understand, the minute amount of DNA that was found, it has to be amplified in a laboratory, and it was that process that was called into question.
In cross-examination, the defense challenges the accuracy of the technique known as low copy number analysis.
There have been other cases around the world where low copy number DNA had been used and had not been accepted as evidence because there were so many questions around it, but in this case it was accepted.
The prosecution rests its case. Despite the compelling evidence, the defense believes they can strike back with a killer blow. Once again, the focus moves back to Joanne Lees and her original account to police. Following years of media suspicion for possible involvement in the disappearance of her boyfriend, Peter Falconio, the defense calls Joanne Lees to the stand. In her original statement, she claimed their attacker had tied her hands behind her back. But the driver who picked her up on the road after the attack says her hands were tied in front of her body.
The defense was saying, look, it's impossible for you to move your hands from the back of you to the front of you.
During the cross-examination, the point was raised and Ms. Lees came to say that she could give a demonstration of this capacity.
So there was an adjournment at the end of the defence's questioning. She went out to another room. She put on a pair of track pants, tied her hands behind her back with a tie from somebody's suit. Then she was sat in the witness chair again while everyone filed back into the court with her hands tied behind her back. It was like time had stood still for her at these points, so she was under a lot of pressure. She sat down on the ground, moved her hands from behind her to in front of her, and that was the end of it.
It's a major turning point in the trial. Finally, people believe Joanne's account of what happened. On the 37th day of the trial, at 12:50 p.m., the jury leaves the court to consider their verdict. Joanne waits with the Falconio family. Just 8 hours later, the jury returns with a unanimous decision. It's the end of a 5-year journey for Joanne.
It was guilty after guilty after guilty after guilty. So I can only imagine the emotion that she felt at the time, a total vindication of all the people that had ever doubted her.
Bradley John Murdoch is sentenced to life in prison.
It's over, I can get on with my life. He's never going to be able to hurt anyone else again. He consumed my thoughts and my life for 5 years. I'm not letting him take any more of that.
All that's left now is for Joanne to face the media, who doubted her for so long.
Today marks the conclusion of an intense period of distress for myself and the Falconio family.
This will enable us to take another step in the grieving process for Pete. We would now request you all allow us some space and privacy to do this.
Still, one question hangs over the verdict. Where is Peter's body?
We are pleased with the verdict. However, this will not bring Peter back.
In terms of finding Peter Falconio's body, it's certainly got to be almost impossible. When Bradley John Murdoch left the site of the crime, he went back to Alice Springs and then he drove across the country to Broome. This is a vast area of land. We're talking an area half the size of Europe where the body could be.
Bradley John Murdoch is the only one with the key to the mystery.
He's never admitted his guilt. He's never given any sort of indication that he was responsible and indicated where he has disposed of Peter's body. If he's got any redeeming features, I would encourage him to do so.
Today, Murdoch continues to proclaim his innocence.